So hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. So today is 28 June 2024 and today we have few important articles that one by one we'll try to discuss all those important articles, because we all knew that we have one practice question every day, and yesterday I've given one practice question, right? So this question was Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan, sometimes seen in news, comes under which of the following ministry? So this is the question that I have given to you yesterday, and the correct answer for this question is option A. It comes under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, right? So yesterday I've told you that this Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan is a drug-free India. We also have a goal of making India drug-free by 2047. And in fact, it is an ambitious goal, because the drug menace, drug abuse is one of the most challenging and most pressing issue that we have been facing currently. Because if you recall that India is located between two largest drug producing regions in the world, right? So one is Golden Crescent, and the other is Golden Triangle and Golden Crescent. So these two are the largest drug producing regions in the world, and India is situated between these two largest drug producing regions. Now this Golden Crescent, if we talk about the countries which falls under this Golden Crescent: Pakistan, Afghanistan obviously, and Iran. So these three countries part of the Golden Crescent. And Golden Triangle, so it includes Myanmar, Thailand, Laos. So those countries forms part of the Golden Triangle. So because of that reason, India is very often used as a global drugs transshipment hub. So because of that reason, this drug abuse and drug menace is one of the most pressing issue for us. And therefore, in order to make India drug free, this Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan was launched, and we wanted to make Bharat Nasha Mukti, or drug free, by 2047. And it comes under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, right? Now you can see the explanation also. Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan, it comes under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, as I have already explained. And in fact, it is one of the ambitious program, right? So in fact, when we look into this Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan program and its implementation details, it is currently operational in all districts across the country. So not just a few districts which have the higher drug abuse problem, or the districts which we see a higher cultivation of these different drug crops. Rather, it is currently operational in all districts across the country, and hence option A, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, is the correct answer. Now, what is the basic objective of Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan? Why it was launched? So the basic objective is to create awareness about the ill effects and evil effects of the substance drug abuse, especially among youth. Now, if you look into the people who are addicted to drugs, majority of the people who are youth, right? So they are in their young ages, college going students, and students, high school going students, college going students, university going students, and youth due to unemployment problems. So they are mostly addicted to the drugs. So therefore the substance abuse among the youth is highest, and special focus will be on higher education institutes, university campuses, schools. And in fact, as part of this Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan program, so reach out programs to the community, and even garnering community involvement and ownership of the Abhiyan. So everything is undertaken as part of the Nasha Mukti Bharat Abhiyan. The objective is to make India drug free by the year 2047, right? This is an ambitious goal. Since we have a lot of youth population, we need to reach out to everyone. We need to create a lot of awareness among the youth about the ill effects and the evil effects of the drug abuse. Now today also I have given one important practice question. This is also a very, very important question. You may see such questions in your examinations, right? The question is, which of the following releases Global Financial Stability Report? Option A, International Monetary Fund. Option B, Reserve Bank of India. Option C, World Trade Organization. And option D, World Bank. And this is easy question. Try to answer this question in the comment section. We'll provide the correct answer in tomorrow's class. And let's start our discussion with few important articles that they've given in today's different newspapers. Now, first important news article that we're going to discuss is that recently there is a new discovery of species. An antelope like mammal from Bhutan recorded at the lowest elevation in Western Assam, right? So this is the news that you can see here on this image that this is like an antelope like a mammal. Right. So there were a number of mammalian species, and even if you look into the Barasinga, so that is also a mammal, and therefore earlier this particular species are known to found in Bhutan, but it is recorded in lower elevations in the state of Assam also. So that is the recent finding about this mammalian species, and this mammalian species is called with the name mainland zero. Mainland zero, that is the name which was given to this particular mammalian species, and it is a mainland zero. Right now, when we talk about this mainland zero, it is a mammal that looks exactly like a cross between a goat and an antelope. So if there is a cross breeding between goat and antelope, so how it looks, so that is how this mainland zero actually looks like. Now earlier, as I've already told you, that it is found in the higher elevations in Bhutan, but now it is recorded in the lowest elevation beyond Bhutan. And in fact, Bhutan is very well known for its natural habitat. Right, Bhutan is a natural habitat of this mainland zero, but now it is found in the Western Assam. It is recently recorded in the Western Assam. So just remember this name, that is mainland zero. Right. So where in Assam this mainland zero was found? It was Raimona National Park. Raimona National Park in Assam, where this mainland zero was found. And this national park was located in the western part of the Assam, right? So extreme western part of the Assam, India. And in fact, it spread across the Raimona National Park, spread across Gosaigaon, Kokrajhar subdivisions of Kokrajhar district of Bodoland territorial region. So this is where this Raimona National Park is located in Assam. Now when we look into the details of this mainland zero, so this mainland zero is a species of zero, right? So it is a zero species, and this zero species is native to Himalayas. Remember, Himalayas are also spread across Bhutan. So this zero is native to Himalayas and Southeast Asia. Along with Southeast Asia, it is also native to China. Right. So when we talk about this mainland zero that is recently recorded in the western part of Assam, especially in this Raimona National Park, so this mainland zero is very closely associated with the red zero that you can see over this image. And in fact, when we talk about this red zero and its habitat and its distribution across the world, so it mainly founds in central and southern China. Right. So this red zero is found in central China and southern China. Along with central and southern China, there are a number of countries in the Southeast Asia such as Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Indonesian island of Sumatra. In all these places you can see this red zero, and this mainland zero is closely associated with the red zero, and red zero habitat and its distribution across the world is China, Southeast Asia, including the Sumatra island of Indonesia. And in fact, this red zero species and its natural habitat is forested mountain ranges. It very often found in these forested mountain habitats. Now when we look into the conservation status of this particular zero, the mainland zero, so it is protected under the CITES Appendix 1. And in fact, when I say this CITES, it is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, right? So I will write here Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So that is CITES convention, right? So whenever any species is listed in Appendix 1 of this CITES convention, so the trade between different nations is prohibited, right? So the trade in such animals is prohibited whenever any species is listed in the Appendix 1 of the CITES, right? Because they have been facing the highest threat, and they are also very often vulnerable, or they are also very often traded illegally. So because of such threat perception, CITES, it is a legally binding global convention, and this mainland zero is placed in Appendix 1, so that prevents illegal trade of this mainland zero between different countries or between individuals, especially the organized crime networks trade in these animals and animal parts. So therefore the CITES Appendix 1 prohibits or prevents such trade in animal and animal parts. Now when we look into this article, that a lone mainland zero, so this was recorded at 96 meters above the mean sea level at Raimona National Park in western Assam. So we have already understood that this Raimona National Park is located in the western part of westernmost part of Assam. So therefore this particular species, the mainland zero, was found in this Raimona National Park, and in fact it is elusive animal, and that is found for the first time within the radius of 1 kilometer from the human habitation. So elusive animal in the sense that we cannot see these species easily, right? So we cannot record them easily. So that is the elusive nature of such species, right? For example, when we talk about the elusive species, snow leopard in Himalayas is an elusive species. So this is an elusive species. So therefore this particular species is found for the first time in 1 kilometer radius of human habitations. Now also remember, whenever a species coming very close to the human habitations, it would also face highest risk of its survival, because that creates a problem of human wildlife conflict, also human wildlife conflict as well. And this has also been indicating that the habitat fragmentation has been taking place, right? Habitat fragmentation has been taking place. This habitat fragmentation is taking place because of the deforestation that is being carried out for the various purposes in recent times, right? For expansion of agriculture is one reason, and timbering is another reason. Real estate, human settlements, and then illegal mining, and even encroachment of these forest lands. So all these factors have been contributing to the habitat fragmentation of such animals, and because of this reason now these animals are coming very close to the human habitations. Now in fact, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, it is also known as IUCN. So IUCN report has mentioned that this mainland zero inhabits in areas at altitudes of around 200 meters to 3000 meters, and it is very surprising that this mainland zero is found just 96 meters above mean sea level. And the reason is habitat fragmentation, right? So I have also told you that the reasons for the habitat fragmentation in recent times. And in fact, when we talk about the original habitat of this mainland zero, so mainland zero also has the original habitat. Its original habitat spreads across the border in the Phipsu Wildlife Sanctuary and Royal Manas National Park in Bhutan. So this is its original habitat of this mainland zero. Now next we'll look into this drug menace or drug abuse, the problem. Okay, so rising drug usage, global drug usage, and of course it is a growing concern, especially among young people. So young people are very often addicted to drug, and this drug abuse is a very challenging or very pressing issue that we have been facing, because with drug abuse there are multiplier implications. For example, drug abuse increases crime rate, drug abuse among students decreases the learning outcomes. This is true, right? So it reduces the learning outcomes among students, and when their learning outcomes are declining, it would be less likely that they would get employment. So therefore it would also increases unemployment in countries like India. For example, if you look into country like India, we have a largest demographic dividend, right? So since we have a largest demographic dividend, now when majority of our youth are addicted to drugs, so that would resulting in wastage of this demographic dividend, right? So in fact it would also fuel organized crime networks. It also fuel organized crime networks. And apart from organized crime networks, the problems like black money, money laundering, and drug peddling, and children are being used as drug peddlers, and drug trafficking across the borders. So all these issues creates a lot of problems for the law enforcement agencies, right? So law enforcement agencies. So these are the challenges that we have been facing because of increasing drug abuse. This is the scenario not just in India but across the world. But as I have already told you that India is located between two largest drug producing regions in the world. One is the Golden Crescent, so that is located in countries like Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and followed by that we also have this Golden Triangle, right? So this Golden Crescent looks like this and Golden Triangle looks like this. So since these two are the largest drug producing regions and India is located between these two regions, it very often becomes difficult for India to control this drug menace or drug abuse, right? So now let's dive deep into this article. This United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, so it has reported that there is a significant increase in the global drug usage and drug abuse. And in fact, this United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime is the highest office at the international level for control and prevention of drug abuse and drug usage. And therefore, according to the report submitted by the UNODC, so there has been a significant increase in the global drug usage. And this has also been highlighting a comprehensive strategy that is required to address this issue of drug menace. So there is no doubt that drug menace or drug abuse is a serious challenge that we must address such challenges. So when we talk about this drug abuse, so United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, so this report has also highlighted that in fact, if you look at the global data on drug abuse, so number of people who are addicted to drugs is around 292 million people, right? 292 million people so far addicted to drugs across the world. So if we translate this into crores, around 29 crore people have addicted to drugs. And in fact, if you look into the total increase of number of people who are addicted to drugs, it is around 20% of the people. Compared to the last decade, 20% of the increase in number of people who are addicted to drugs. Now when we look into the the categorization of drugs which are being consumed by the individuals who are addicted to drugs. Cannabis is the most commonly used drug, right? So cannabis, because of its easier availability for the people, cannabis is the most commonly available drug, and out of 292 people, around 228 people have been consuming this cannabis alone. So followed by cannabis, there are other forms of drugs also which are being consumed. So that includes this opioids. 60 million people have been consuming this opioids, and apart from that, this amphetamines, right? So amphetamines are also a major form of drug which is being consumed by around 30 million people, and we very often hear about cocaine, so which is a major substance of international drug trafficking. The cocaine is being used by 23 million people, right? So 23 million people have been using cocaine, and even the last one, this ecstasy, so this was used by around 20 million people. So there are a lot of people who have been using this different forms of drug. So that has been the easy availability, and in fact the failure of the law enforcement agencies to prevent this drug trafficking has been resulting in drugs easily entering into the countries, right? And these drugs are also easily available for the people, especially young people, across universities, schools, colleges, and across different places. And because of that reason, it leads to the increasing drug menace in India or any other countries across the world. And when we look into the treatment, right, so whenever people addicted with the drugs, it is very important that we need to de-addict them, and treatment is to de-addict people who are addicted with the drugs. And when you look into the treatment, there is a lot of gap in treatment between men and women, right? So this also indicates a lot of gender inequality or gender disparities with respect to the access to treatment. So in fact, if you look into the data, around 64 million people have been suffering with different drug disorders. Once they are addicted with these drugs, so they start suffering with these drug disorders. So around 64 million people across the world have been suffering with this drug disorders. However, out of 64 million people, only 1 in 11 receiving the treatment. Okay, so that is a very lowest proportion, that only 1 in 11 who have been facing such a serious disorders because of drug abuse have been receiving treatment. And in fact, when we talk about women receiving such treatment for this drug use disorders, it is substantially lower. Okay, because there are a lot of barriers for women to get this treatment because of the drug abuse. Only 1 in 18 women. Okay, so if you look into the total women, for example, 18 women have been addicted and they have been suffering with the drug use disorders. Only 1 have been receiving the proper treatment, compared to 1 man out of 7 men receiving the treatment. So this has to be addressed. This gender disparity has to be addressed with respect to the drug use disorder treatment. So however, what will be the implications of such gender disparities with respect to treatment, and how it is going to affect the social stability is also another thing that we need to introspect. There is no doubt that there is a gender disparity in treatment. So how there is a gender disparity in treatment? Because out of 18 women who have been facing this drug use disorders, only 1 receiving proper treatment, and this is with respect to women, right? And when we look into the men receiving treatment, out of 7 men, only 1, right? So out of 18 women, only 1 receiving the treatment, drug disorder treatment, drug use disorder treatment, and out of 7 men, 1 man receiving this drug use treatment, drug use disorder treatment. So that we can clearly see there is a huge disparity. And in fact, women have been facing number of social barriers, economic barriers. So because of all these barriers, it very often becomes difficult for women to get this drug use disorder treatment because of these barriers that they have been facing. And therefore, in this context, the need of the hour is gender sensitive approaches in healthcare and rehabilitation is required. So this huge gap in providing treatment need to be identified first, and we need to frame these gender sensitive policies that women require a greater attention, greater care, and we need to frame such policies which addresses the healthcare needs of the woman along with their rehabilitation also. And in fact, so when we talk about the people who have addicted with the drugs, the people in their young ages, the people who are youth are most of the people who are addicted with the drugs. And therefore, we need to have data driven and evidence based policies, right? Whenever we say evidence based policies, we need to have a lot of evidence about the targeted group and potential hotspots to act immediately on this drug abuse. And evidence based policy will address the source of the drugs, will strengthen the existing law enforcement agencies by providing them crucial inputs about the drug trafficking law enforcement agencies, because it provides a lot of data and lot of inputs about the drug trafficking, the source of drugs, and the people who have been involved in this drug trafficking or involved in drug peddling. And apart from that, so we can be able to identify the target group. When we able to identify the targeted group, these sensitive policies, the sensitization of such group can be done by various approaches and involving NGOs and civil society organizations and different stakeholders. So along with the targeted group, so we can also identify the potential hotspots across the country which have the higher problem of drug abuse, so that we would be able to minimize such problem. So therefore, in this context, this evidence based policy or data driven policy is very, very important. So based on the evidence available, we need to frame different programs and policies. So when we have such evidence based policies, those policies essentially emphasizes on developing skills, awareness and knowledge among the youth or the targeted group. To a major extent, we can get them out of this drug abuse. And apart from that, the drug abuse very often lead to other crimes, because it will not take place independently. It is associated with several other crimes, because it is very often believed that whenever we talk about the drug trafficking, so this drug trafficking very often fuels the organized crime and organized crime networks. And this organized crime networks very often further resulted in wildlife trafficking, right? So it results in wildlife trafficking, so that would be a problem. And apart from wildlife trafficking, it could also lead to the financial frauds. Now whenever I say financial frauds, these financial frauds involves counterfeiting of currency, black money would be circulated, and also money laundering would takes place, and even illegal resource extraction, organ trade or organ trafficking or illegal human trafficking would also be fueled by the drug trafficking. So these are the multi-pronged problems that are very often associated with the drug trafficking as a menace. And what should be the strategies that we should adopt to address a drug usage, and what are the consequences? Now we need to understand this. So there is a multifaceted approach. So why there is a multifaceted approach? Because we need to address this strategy from the source to the targeted group. We need to deal with the number of agencies or number of factors and stakeholders to deal with such a large drug menace. So therefore, it is a very desirable that we need to have such a multi-pronged strategy to deal with the drug menace, because this multi-pronged strategy would address various issues, right? So as I've already told you, that such a multi-pronged strategy would focus on the source of such drugs, and it would also strengthen the capacities or capabilities of the law enforcement agencies, and that is also very very important to prevent the drug trafficking. And apart from that, the intelligence sharing is very very important. Intelligence sharing between the countries, between different individuals, especially the law enforcement agencies, is very very important. Since we have a federal setup, so it is very important that between different states and center, there should be a regular flow of intelligence about the drug trafficking and drug abuse. So all these factors must be followed in letter and spirit whenever we adopt such a multi-pronged strategy. Right. So now after that, law enforcement and health rights should also be taken into consideration, right? So whenever we look into this multi-pronged strategy, the law enforcement and strengthening the law enforcement agencies is also very very important, but because that could very often disrupt the criminal networks who have been involved in drug trafficking, right? So we need to address such issues first, and then we need to look for strengthening healthcare rights. So disrupting criminal networks must be balanced with upholding human rights and also providing healthcare services to those people who are struggling with the addiction. We should not neglect this area as well. We need to provide healthcare services to the people who have been already addicted with the drugs, and we need to run de-addiction camps. So these de-addiction camps actually help us bring the people who are addicted with drugs out of this drug menace, and it gives them a new life. And as I have already told you, that India is located in this golden crescent and golden triangle, right? So if you look at India, so it is located between golden crescent and golden triangle. Now if you look into the global production of opium, so it has substantially declined in the year 2023, right? So particularly in Afghanistan, there is a 95% decline in the production of opium, and in fact it is a good news. But on the other hand, if you look at Myanmar, there is a 36% increase. But overall we can say that the global efforts have been giving positive results, and countries have been taking steps to reduce the production and curb the illegal production of drugs. And therefore there is a need for collective effort from all the countries, especially from the international community. So that is very very important to achieve the drug abuse, or the drug problem can be completely eradicated across the world. Even though it is a difficult goal, but the collective effort from the global community would give sustainable results over a period of time. So next important article is about the Riazi and the cross-border terrorism, right? So we already knew that in Jammu and Kashmir, at a place called Riazi, Pakistani based terrorist organization has attacked a tourist bus, a pilgrimage bus, and that has led to the killing of tens of people. So that attack took place in Jammu and Kashmir at a place called Riazi, and in fact a Pakistani based terrorist group claims responsibility for this attack. And in fact, when we talk about this Riazi attack, so it can be closely associated with the cross-border terrorism that India is vulnerable, or this menace of cross-border terrorism that India has been facing from last several decades. And in fact, it is one of the key concern of India because several Pakistani based terrorist groups, they are entering India illegally and they are carrying out these terrorist attacks and also fueling radicalization and separatism among the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Now we'll understand the context. The context we already knew that because it was trending in the internet, right? So Riazi terrorist attack that took place in June 9, and this Riazi terrorist attack has been highlighting the issue of cross-border terrorism that India has been facing, or it has been affecting India, because these trained terrorists come to the other side of border. They start attacking innocent civilians, and they are particularly from Pakistan, and this is a serious concern for India from last several decades. And in fact, this is not the first time that the incident of cross-border terrorism has took place in Jammu and Kashmir. So there were a number of such historical attacks which were carried out in the past also. And in fact, such terrorist attacks, especially the cross-border terrorist attacks, actually aiming to disrupt India's stability during the significant political movements, especially recent Lok Sabha elections and Prime Minister Narendra Modi swearing in as the Prime Minister for the third term. Right? So there is no doubt that cross-border terrorism is a major challenge that we have been facing. But the major issue is how can we address such a problem? So it is very, very important that we need to address such incidents of cross-border terrorism. Now, if you look into this Riazi attack, so this Riazi attack, according to the author, is a very closely associated with the attack on Indian consulate in Afghanistan in the year 2014. In 2014 also, there was an attack on Indian consulate in Afghanistan, Herat. And in fact, there is a lot of similarity between the Riazi incident and attack on Indian consulate, and these attacks have been focused on undermining India's, especially undermining Prime Minister Narendra Modi's pivotal movements. And apart from that, we should not neglect the role of Pakistan in promoting cross-border terrorism. Pakistan is the primary factor in promoting the cross-border terrorism into India. So this is also comes under the proxy war. Okay, so proxy war of Pakistan is promoting the cross-border terrorism into India and attack as many times as possible, because it is not possible for the Pakistan to wage a conventional war against much powerful and much stronger India. And therefore, since they cannot wage a conventional war, they are doing it in an unconventional way by promoting this proxy war, by encouraging terrorists and promoting the cross-border terrorism and attacks in India by these terrorists. And in fact, there is an evidence that there is a links between Pakistani military establishment and the terrorist organizations in India, and Pakistan has been continuously supporting these terrorist organizations to cross the border to Indian side and carry out attacks. So since the cross-border terrorism has been enjoying the support of state, it very often difficult for India to deal with such terrorism, because ultimately India need to deal with Pakistani establishment. Since Pakistani establishment has been extending direct support to the cross-border terrorism, so even if India engages with Pakistan, there will be no solution to such an issue. So in fact, whenever we look into these cross-border terrorist attacks, these cross-border terrorist attacks very often inspired by the Afghan jihad, and through these terrorist organizations and cross-border terrorism, what Pakistan has been doing, Pakistan has been promoting separatism in Jammu and Kashmir. Along with separatism, so Pakistan has also been promoting radicalization among youth in Jammu and Kashmir. So we have seen there was a lot of stone pelting, a lot of separatist sentiments among the people of Jammu and Kashmir before Article 370 was not abrogated. And this has very often led to the violence in Jammu and Kashmir, and such a violence, separatism, radicalization is not conducive for the national unity and integrity. So we can say that it would threaten national unity and integrity of our nation. So therefore it is very important that India should move carefully on this. So what are the countermeasures that India has followed to counter this cross-border terrorism? So India in fact developed this counter-insurgency, counter-terrorism strategies earlier to deal with the cross-border terrorism in an efficient manner. So whenever we talk about this counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism measures, so they essentially a combination of military force and the political activity. Whenever we talk about the political activity, democratic decentralization, giving more powers, more finances, infrastructure development, employment creation, and economic growth. All these things comes under the political activity, and counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency is a combination of both military force and the political activities. And apart from that, diplomatically, India has been trying a lot to diplomatically isolate Pakistan from the international stage. And in fact, we can say that India's efforts to isolate Pakistan have given fruitful results, because international community has very often and time and again understood that how Pakistan has been promoting terrorism, especially the cross-border terrorism, because India very often emphasizes on evidence gathering or collecting evidence and then proving to the international community how Pakistan has been promoting this cross-border terrorism. And even though there is a strong pressure on Pakistan to curb the terrorist activities, curb its support to terrorism, Pakistan very often expressing its reluctance to take any measures to curb terrorism and terrorist activities on its soil. And in fact, in 2019, there was a Pulwama terror attack that led to the killing of tens of security forces. So therefore, after this Pulwama terror attack, India adopted the strategy of preemptive strikes and surgical operations as well along against these terrorist threats. And therefore, we can say that there is a shift from a pure diplomacy to such a strategic measures whenever India is being attacked. And in fact, the current National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, very often emphasizes on defensive offense as a policy. Defensive offense as a policy against neighbors, especially against Pakistan. So we should not always follow the policy of defense, or we should not be defensive. Rather, we should be defensive offensive. And apart from that, there are certain challenges with respect to dealing with the cross-border terrorism. Those challenges, one most important challenge is, what does it mean whenever we say unacceptable attack? So there is no definition of such an unacceptable definition, and because of such definitions, it has been creating a lot of ambiguity among the security forces to deal with such terrorist attacks. So therefore, there is a clear strategy and there should be a clear definition from Indian side. What does it mean whenever it says an unacceptable terrorist attacks, so that there will be no confusion and there will be more clarity and we can deal better with such terrorist attacks. And this is what the author has been emphasizing here. And apart from that, as I have already told you, India has done a lot to isolate Pakistan at the global stage, and in fact the global community has also recognized India's efforts, and it has also recognized that Pakistan has been openly supporting terrorism, and Pakistan has a key role in promoting terrorism. However, despite international community's recognition, India continues to emphasize on the importance of sharing evidence and engaging with the global community as well. And in fact, this is the approach of a responsible country like India, because India believes in international law, rule of law, and India is also a democracy and responsible power, right? Because of that reason, despite Pakistan openly supporting cross-border terrorism, it has been very often emphasizing on sharing evidence with all different countries to expose Pakistan at the international stage, and it has also been engaging the global community in its efforts to expose Pakistan. And after that, in fact, the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has also recently called for a solution to this cross-border terrorism problem. And in fact, India has very often advocating that Pakistan must stop cross-border terrorism. Pakistan should not support cross-border terrorism. And therefore, this required a comprehensive solution. So it requires a military solution, right? So militarily, we need to address such cross-border terrorism and its instances. And apart from a military solution, it requires a political solution dealing with certain quarters within the Pakistan to prevent their support to the cross-border terrorism, right? So apart from that, we need to further improve infrastructure, especially the border infrastructure. So it is very, very important, especially fencing of borders should be an option, so that could prevent this cross-border terrorism. And we should regularly and constantly engage with the international community and share evidence to the international community and expose Pakistan at the international stage to further isolate Pakistan at the international stage. So this is what the author has been explaining. And the next important article is about tourism and the potential of tourism, especially in a country like India. And in fact, there is no doubt that tourism in India, there's a big potential for tourism. It can attract tourists from different parts of the world because of its medical tourism, religious tourism, historical tourism, religious tourism, cultural tourism, and even the environmental tourism. So there is a lot of potential in India. So if we can say that tourism sector has created so far 11 million jobs, and it also has the potential of creating around 37 million jobs in future. Now, since unemployment is a major problem, it is very important that we need to recognize sectors like tourism which have a lot of potential in creation of gainful employment opportunities for our youth. And in fact, if you look into the future growth forecast of this tourism industry, so it is quite bright, but still there is a lot of development in terms of infrastructure and skilled personnel is required with respect to exploring or exploiting the potential of tourism in India, right? So we should be determined to exploit the potential of tourism in India, because it would create gainful employment opportunities for the youth, and employment is very, very important. Along with the gainful employment opportunities, it is a potential source of forex, because whenever the foreigners comes here, they exchange forex for Indian currency, and it would potentially boost the local economies, and it would also give a thrust to the economic growth in India, the tourism industry. And we would be able to identify and protect different cultural heritage across India, right? So this is the potential of tourism. Now, when we talk about the tourism, so India's economic strategy essentially emphasizes on employment growth. So it is very important that the economic growth should result in employment growth. So if you look into India's economic growth, it has not emphasized adequately on employment. Rather, we can call India's growth as jobless growth. So why it is a jobless growth? So it is jobless growth because we skipped industry and manufacturing sector. We skipped industry and manufacturing sector. From agriculture sector, we directly moved to the service sector, and manufacturing and industry sector has the lot of potential to create large scale employment opportunities for the people who are displaced from the agriculture sector. From the industry manufacturing sector to economy moves to the service sector. So because of this reason, India's growth is known as jobless growth. And the strategy of economic growth emphasizes on GDP growth along with the employment creation, and that is very, very important. They are twin objectives. Now, in this context, ensuring economic growth or GDP growth along with employment opportunities, gainful employment opportunities, tourism has a lot of potential to contribute to the GDP and also address the problem of unemployment, and it would also together result in the economic development in a country like India. So that is the essence of developing tourism and tourism potential. Now, when we look into some data, some facts with respect to tourism and its contribution to the economic growth. So overall share of tourism to India's total employment opportunities is 5.5% of the employment that the tourism has been contributing, whether directly or indirectly. And even along with the employment, tourism sector alone contributing to the 0.9% of the GDP. And this data has been provided by periodic labor force participation survey. So this periodic labor force participation survey 22-23 has provided this data with respect to tourism. However, there is no doubt that tourism has a multiplier effect on the economy. Now, whenever we talk about the tourism and its multiplier effect, as I have already told you, that it is a potential contributor to GDP, and it would result in gainful employment opportunities, and it would also provide livelihoods to the local people and boost the local economies. So therefore, when we look into its total GDP contribution, direct and indirect share of tourism, so it is around 1.8% of the total India's GDP. And in fact, there is a lot of potential that this number will significantly increases. And in fact, the total potential of tourism as a sector to the employment creation is around 76 million people. It would create employment for around 76 million people if we tap the potential of tourism as a sector. So in fact, during the pandemic times, COVID-19 pandemic times, tourism sector was the worst hit sector. So the countries which have dependent on tourism were the worst hit because of the pandemic, because of the global lockdowns and the fears of spread of this virus. So there was a complete standstill in this tourism industry or tourism as a sector. So therefore, the focus should be bringing tourism and its potential pre-pandemic levels. So pre-pandemic, tourism sector was contributing to 2.7% of India's GDP. So that is actually a huge contribution to India's total GDP. So bringing these numbers pre-pandemic is very, very important. And apart from that, pre-pandemic, tourism sector has been contributing to the 95 million employment opportunities, and it has a potential to create 195 million jobs by the end of this decade of 2030, right? So 135 million employment opportunities is also a huge numbers. And if you look into the global level, different countries and their economies dependent on tourism as a sector, imagine that the country called Croatia. So Croatia is a very small country. Despite being a small country, around 20% of Croatia's GDP comes from the tourism sector. So therefore, you can imagine that such a small countries have been effectively using their existing potential for aiding their economy and employment creation. And similarly, China tourism sector has been contributing to the a huge 11% of its overall total GDP. And in fact, when we look into China, it is a manufacturing powerhouse. It is a manufacturing powerhouse and it is a global export hub. So despite being a manufacturing focused economy, 11% of its GDP is coming from the tourism alone. So therefore, India in terms of development of tourism is lagged behind when we compare it with many of these countries, right? So there is a lot of potential and there is a lot of unutilized assets in India. We need to utilize all these assets in a right manner, right? When I say utilizing such assets in a right manner, we have a coastline, a beautiful coastline, a long coastline. We have mountains that promotes ecotourism, cultural heritage, religious sites. So all these things very often offer immense and untapped tourism potential compared to other countries. However, there are certain challenges and the policy recommendations also. However, so whenever we are planning to boost the tourism potential, policymakers must optimize both GDP growth rate and even the employment growth rate. We need to look both of them as twin opportunities or twin options to explore the potential of the tourism sector. And apart from that, there is a need for an adequate and significant resource allocation so that we can develop the facilities and we can further enhance the incentives for this particular sector. So therefore we can explore and exploit the potential of tourism sector. And we need to focus on developing a proper tourism ecosystem in India, and that is very, very important. So in order to develop such a robust ecosystem, we need to make investments in travel options, hotels and high quality services at tourism sites, and it is very, very important to boost the potential of tourism sector. So there is no doubt that India has a huge potential. We need to explore that potential for our advantage, so that we can also substantially increase tourism sector's contribution to India's GDP and creation of gainful employment opportunities, right? So that's all in this lecture. So please like the video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much.